never thought that I would bury one of my kids before me.
But that's exactly what Kim Sheely had to do 3 years ago. Her 28-year-old daughter, Shatisha Sheely, was one of 3 women whose bodies were found wrapped in garbage bags in East Cleveland. With tears streaming down her face, it is clear this mother's heart is still broken and the pain is still very real.
What does evil smell like? Ask the neighbors in East Cleveland who spent weeks in July 2013 trying to tell anybody who'd listen that something was dead in their neighborhood. That smell led police to a garage. Inside that garage was a body. And that body? It was just the beginning of one of Ohio's most disturbing serial murder cases. If you into true crime stories like this one, make sure you hit that subscribe button for True Crime Tragedies. We bring you the most gripping cases that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Now, let's get into this story. Listen, there's this moment that went down in court that you need to understand right from the jump. A father, grieving his daughter, had to sit there and watch her killer. And this is what he said.
How you doing, Your Honor? My name is Van Terry. Wow, that's really Terry. Right now, I guess we're supposed to, in our hearts, forgive this clown. Who's touched our families, taken my child.
The courtroom just erupted. People who witnessed it said it was something they'd never forget. One person described it like this: "Oh, it was heart-wrenching. It was frustrating to just sit there and to see the facial expression to know that he was that angry." When somebody asked about the incident, someone close to the situation reflected, "Were you surprised that he had done that?" "I was very surprised when it happened. I could understand why he did it. Not that he planned to do any of it, but when he heard that his daughter was mutilated, that was the part that was difficult for him." See, that father, Van Terry, he carried that pain until the day he died. Van passed away in February of this year. Yeah. When asked how Van was doing with losing his daughter, the answer was heartbreaking.
Mr. Terry, I am so sorry for the loss of your daughter, but I really appreciate the time today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate you as well.
My goodness, watching that video, I've seen it probably 6 times today. Why did you do that?
I don't recall doing it. It was an instance of grieving, and I just snapped as I was talking.
So you were talking because you were up there speaking, you were giving what they call a victim impact statement. And so how far from him were you?
I'm going to say anywhere from 10, maybe 15 feet.
Did you look him in the eye?
Well, that's what I was trying to do because I wanted to get to see the person who hurt my daughter. But when I turned around to look at him, and he hit me with that grin, I lost my mind.
He grinned at you?
Yes, he did.
And so the man who murdered your daughter dares to grin at you, and then you snapped, you leapt. What did you hope to do?
Actually, I wanted to break his jaw, get that grin off his face. If we're being honest.
We are being honest. We are being honest. I know that a lot of people talk about forgiveness when they sit up there in cases like this. Where are you? Right, how are you feeling?
Well, forgiveness is not for the person. Forgiveness is for you. Because you're supposed to forgive that person so that they don't occupy so much time in your heart, time in your mind. So you forgive that person, and then you move on with your life. But right now, it's still too hard for me. It's been 3 years. It's still too hard for me to do that.
I know that he was sentenced to death. How do you feel about that? Is that what you were wanting?
Well, in Ohio, it's going to take a while for him to die. If he was dying today, yeah, I would want that. But it's going to take a while for him to die. He has the right to appeal it. He's going to go through all the paperwork and the process, and it's going to take a while. So we got to wait for all that to go down, 10 years? That takes too long. We got to pay for that. That's not right.
There was talk of potentially you even facing charges for wanting, I'm sure as a lot of fathers in your shoes would have wanted to do, break his jaw. Do you know if that's on the table or no?
I wasn't told anything about charges. They took my name down off my ID, but they didn't say anything about charges. And if charges are come out of it, I'll face it when I face it. I'm not gonna question or stress about it.
Can we end this conversation not talking about the man sitting across from you, but talking about your daughter? Can you tell me about her?
Sherelda's my angel. Well, everybody called her Sherelda. I called her Heaven.
Why is that?
I call my kids according to how they act, and that's my heaven. So, to me, he took mine. She's a praise dancer. She's a holy person. She's heavy into the church, and she's my reader, my bookworm.
She was 18. You say every day is still tough 3 years later. What do you miss most about her?
Her hugs. Most commonly, most folks call her Hugzilla because every time she sees you, she want to hug you. And she stayed on my arm, so that's what I miss about her.
Van Terry, thank you for the time. Forgive me for cutting you off. Go ahead.
Well, no, I would at work. I would have to pull her off of my shoulder just so I can work. But when she come down to my shop, she's holding on to me the whole time. I miss that.
Sweet. That is so sweet. I think a lot of parents are watching and thinking they would have done the exact same thing had they been in your shoes in that courtroom. Thank you. And again, I am so sorry.
Thank you. No problem. You have a blessed one.
You too, sir. We'll be right back.
How was he doing with regard to the loss of your daughter? He never healed. You know, that was something that he was not ever able to comprehend of why. It was something that he could never get over. You know how people always say that time heals all wounds? When you lose a child, time doesn't heal that wound. Real talk, that right there tells you everything you need to know about what this case did to these families. Now, Michael Madison wasn't what you'd call a typical serial killer, if there even is such a thing. Born October 15th, 1977, this man came into a world that was already violent, already broken. His childhood was so messed up, so traumatic, that later on his defense team would use it as their main argument for why the courts should show him mercy. But here's the thing about mercy, though. It's something his three victims never got. Angela Deskins, Shatisha Sheely, and Sherella Terry would find out just how merciless their killer really was. The story don't start with Madison's first murder, though. Nah, it starts with a discovery that would unravel everything he'd been doing. July 19, 2013, neighbors had finally had enough. They'd been smelling something foul, something dead, coming from this rented garage in their neighborhood. The neighborhood was already falling apart, buildings abandoned, streets quiet, but this smell was different. When police broke down that garage door, they found something that would stick with them forever. A woman's body, concealed inside multiple garbage bags. Within hours, investigators traced that garage rental to one name, Michael Madison. This 35-year-old registered sex offender was living just a few blocks away, second-floor apartment right above some vacant storefront. While police were getting their search warrants together, mobilizing their whole operation, Madison was already planning his next move. But here's what they didn't know yet. This body they found, it was just the beginning. The crime scene was about to stretch across multiple locations, and at least 3 lives had already been taken. The way that body had been disposed of, so careful, so methodical. It told investigators something important. This wasn't Madison's first time doing this. He'd practiced, he'd perfected his technique. The question wasn't if there were more bodies. The question was how many more they were going to find. As word spread through East Cleveland's tight-knit community, families who'd been missing their daughters, their sisters, their mothers for months started calling police. Hope mixed with dread in every phone call. Those missing person reports that had been sitting in files were about to take on a whole new meaning. The hunt for Michael Madison was about to begin, and what investigators would uncover would shake that community to its core. This is the story of how one man's hatred turned him into a killer, and how the smell of death finally brought justice to East Cleveland. Look, to understand the monster Michael Madison became, you got to understand the hell he came from. His childhood reads like a manual on how to create a serial killer. It's textbook, showing how abuse, systematic and constant, can twist a young mind into something dangerous and unrecognizable. Born to Diane Madison, a woman who'd been abandoned by her own drug-addicted mother, Michael never knew his biological father. John Baldwin denied paternity and disappeared, just gone, leaving Diane to raise her son alone. But see, Diane's idea of what parenting was, it was shaped by her own trauma, creating this cycle of abuse that would go on for generations. The violence started early, man. When Michael was just 2 years old, his mother subjected him to severe physical abuse. When he cried from the pain, she beat him with an extension cord. This wasn't discipline. This was straight-up abuse. And it was just the beginning. And Diane had a revolving door of boyfriends, and each one brought new forms of abuse. These men, temporary fixtures in Michael's life, seemed to be competing in cruelty. One boyfriend beat the toddler so severely that Michael suffered permanent hearing loss in one ear and had to be hospitalized. When social workers examined him, they found something even more disturbing: evidence of sexual abuse. The Department of Child and Family Services finally stepped in. But their solution? Listen, it was almost as damaging as the original problem. They placed Michael with his grandmother, a woman with her own troubled past who continued the cycle of neglect and abuse. Classic case of taking a child out of one dangerous situation and putting him straight into another. When Michael was eventually sent back to his mother's care, nothing had changed. The beatings continued. The neglect persisted. And the hatred? That festered and grew. By age 16, Michael had developed what he would later describe as a complete hatred of women. He blamed the entire female gender for his suffering, creating this twisted worldview that would ultimately drive him to kill. His teenage years were marked by increasingly violent behavior. At 17, he was charged with inappropriately touching a classmate, an early sign of the sexual violence that would define his adult crimes. At 20, drug charges landed him in jail, where he started to understand the power he could have through intimidation and violence. The pattern was clear, right? Michael Madison was learning to hurt others as a way of taking back control over his own pain. What started as a survival mechanism in childhood was evolving into something far more dangerous. The boy who'd been victimized was transforming into the man who would victimize others. By 2001, Madison's hatred had turned into action. He attacked an 18-year-old woman, attempting to assault her before police arrived. He got a 4-year prison sentence that included mandatory treatment for sex offenders. But rehabilitation? That was never Madison's goal. He was just learning to be more careful, more methodical, and way more dangerous. See, prison changed Michael Madison, but not in the way society hoped it would. Instead of rehabilitation, he found refinement. He learned to mask his violent impulses behind a mask of normalcy that would make him far more dangerous when he got out. By 2005, he'd served his time for attempted assault and returned to East Cleveland with a new understanding of how to avoid detection. Madison's post-prison life was carefully set up to give him maximum freedom while keeping minimal oversight. He registered his mother's address on the sex offender registry instead of his own, giving him mobility while looking like he was compliant. He established himself as a small-time drug dealer, a profession that gave him both income and access to vulnerable women who might not be immediately missed if they disappeared. The man who came out of prison was calculating, manipulative. Madison had learned to present himself as charming and attentive, qualities that would prove devastatingly effective in luring victims. He didn't hunt randomly. He selected women who were isolated, struggling, or desperate. His victims weren't chosen for their beauty or their status, but for their vulnerability. In September 2012, Madison convinced a woman named Brittany Darby to move in with him. But this wasn't a romantic relationship. This was a cover operation. Almost immediately after Brittany moved in, Madison announced he wanted an open relationship and started seeing another woman, Shanta Mahone. Brittany got relegated to the guest room, unknowingly serving as Madison's alibi while he began his killing spree. The timing wasn't coincidental. Listen. September 2012 marked the beginning of Madison's murder campaign, starting with 28-year-old Shatisha Sheely. Shatisha was a devoted mother to a 12-year-old daughter and stayed close with her family. On the day she disappeared, she'd called her mother to arrange borrowing money. But she never showed up for their meeting. Shatisha's disappearance didn't raise immediate alarm at first. Her lifestyle had been somewhat unstable, and family members initially thought she'd just moved on without notice. This reaction was exactly what Madison had counted on. Victims whose absence wouldn't immediately trigger intensive investigations. Next came 38-year-old Angela Deskins in June 2013. Angela was a student at Cuyahoga County Community College who listed herself as self-employed in customer service. Her family reported her missing, but in a community where people frequently moved without notice, missing person reports often got limited attention. Madison was exploiting the harsh reality that some victims get mourned more publicly than others. The final known victim was 18-year-old Sherella Terry, who vanished on July 10, 2013. Sherella had been working a summer job at a Cleveland elementary school when she disappeared. Unlike the previous victims, Sherella's disappearance immediately triggered intensive searching. Her father, Larry Terry, flooded the streets with missing person posters and refused to accept that his daughter had simply vanished. Throughout this whole period, Brittany Darby continued living in Madison's apartment, completely unaware that she was sleeping just rooms away from his crimes. Madison's ability to compartmentalize his crimes while maintaining normal relationships showed a level of psychological control that made him particularly dangerous. The predator had perfected his craft, but he was about to make the mistake that would destroy everything. Look, what makes Michael Madison's crimes particularly chilling isn't just the murders themselves. It's the calculated way he continued his daily life while hiding what he'd done. Before we continue, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to True Crime Tragedies. We cover cases like this in depth, bringing you stories that you won't find anywhere else. All right, let's keep going. For months, he maintained relationships and presented himself as a functioning member of society. This wasn't someone who killed in a moment of passion. This was the methodical routine of a predator who'd learned to normalize horror. Brittany Darby's testimony would later reveal the disturbing reality of living with Madison during his killing spree. In early July 2013, she started noticing an increasingly powerful smell of decay filling their apartment. And the odor was so overwhelming it was affecting her ability to sleep and function normally. When she finally confronted Madison about the smell, his response was both creative and revealing. 2 raccoons died in the hall closet, Madison explained with disturbing casualness. When Brittany moved toward the closet to investigate, Madison quickly blocked her path. "You don't want to see that," he warned. "It's gruesome." The fact that Madison could deliver this lie while knowing what was actually in that closet. Listen, that shows you the depth of his psychological detachment. But Madison's performance was becoming harder and harder to maintain. The smell was growing stronger, and neighbors were starting to notice. He was forced to move evidence from the apartment closet to a more remote location. Years later, during police interrogation, Madison would describe the process of moving what he'd hidden, details that would haunt investigators. The logistics of Madison's crimes reveal careful planning and a complete lack of empathy. He wasn't acting in moments of uncontrolled rage. He was methodically selecting, harming, and concealing evidence while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. Madison's choice of disposal sites wasn't random. He selected locations within a confined area near his apartment, places where he could monitor potential discovery while maintaining easy access. The garage where the first body was found was rented specifically for this purpose, giving Madison a controlled environment for his crimes. Meanwhile, the families of his victims were living in agony. Shatisha Sheely's mother, Kameda, was dealing with the double trauma of her daughter's disappearance and her son's death in an unrelated home invasion. When Shatisha failed to appear at her brother's funeral, the family's worst fears started to become real.
Oh, she's never coming back. But we just don't want to accept it.
The murder of a child is something Kim Sheely has had to accept not once, but twice. Her son was murdered 7 months before her daughter.
And now I'm going right back through the same thing. I'm opening wounds back up that I tried to conceal within myself, never forgetting. Well, always want to know why.
Angela Deskin's family was frantically searching for any trace of their missing daughter. Sharilla, Terry's father, was plastering missing person posters throughout Cleveland, refusing to accept that his daughter had simply vanished. As the summer of 2013 went on, Madison's careful control was beginning to crack. The smell was becoming impossible to ignore. Neighbors were asking questions, and the heat was speeding up decomposition. The predator who had successfully hidden his crimes for months was about to be exposed by the very evidence he'd tried so hard to conceal. July 19th. 2013 began like any other day in East Cleveland, but it would end with the discovery that would bring Michael Madison's reign of terror to a sudden and decisive conclusion. The stench that had been building for weeks finally became unbearable, forcing neighbors to take action that would unravel one of Ohio's most disturbing serial murder cases. When police broke into that rented garage and found the first body, they immediately recognized they were dealing with something far more complex than a simple homicide. The methodical way evidence had been concealed suggested this was the work of someone with experience, someone who'd done this before and expected to do it again. The name Michael Madison appeared on the garage rental agreement, immediately focusing the investigation on the registered sex offender living nearby. But Madison wasn't at his apartment when police arrived. He'd fled to his mother's house, perhaps sensing that his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. What followed was a 2-hour standoff that ended with Madison's arrest and the beginning of one of the most extensive crime scene investigations in Cleveland's history. The search that followed the arrest revealed the true scope of Madison's crimes. Within 24 hours, investigators had discovered 2 additional bodies in locations near the original garage. One victim was found in a nearby field, another in the basement of an abandoned house. All 3 bodies showed the same methodical pattern, concealed in ways designed to delay discovery. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. When police announced they were conducting a comprehensive search of the area, over 100 volunteers showed up to help investigate vacant and abandoned buildings throughout the neighborhood. The mobilization revealed both the community's determination to find justice and their collective fear about what else might be hidden in their midst. During his interrogation, Madison made a statement that sent chills through the investigation team. He mentioned Anthony Sowell, the Cleveland strangler who'd murdered 11 women in the same area just years earlier. Investigators started to wonder if Madison had been inspired by Soul's crimes, perhaps seeing them as a template for his own killing spree. The parallels between Madison and Soul were disturbing, right? Both were registered sex offenders who'd targeted vulnerable women in the same East Cleveland neighborhood. It both had methodically concealed evidence in ways designed to delay discovery. Both had continued their normal lives while hiding their crimes. The question that haunted investigators was whether Madison was a copycat killer or if there was something about East Cleveland that attracted this type of predator. Madison's eventual confession provided some answers but raised new questions. He admitted to killing Shatisha Sheely, but claimed he couldn't remember killing the other two victims. This selective memory wasn't unusual among serial killers, who often compartmentalize their crimes to maintain psychological stability. The investigation revealed that Madison had spent months hiding evidence, moving it when necessary, and maintaining relationships while concealing his true nature. His ability to function normally while committing these crimes showed a level of psychological control that made his eventual capture even more significant. The trial of Michael Madison began on April 4, 2016, bringing together the families of his victims, the community he'd terrorized, and the justice system that would ultimately decide his fate. What emerged during the proceedings was a portrait of a man who'd methodically planned and executed murders while showing no remorse for the lives he'd destroyed. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. Madison had confessed to killing Shatisha Sheely. Physical evidence linked him to all three crime scenes, and witness testimony revealed his pattern of targeting vulnerable women who wouldn't be immediately missed. The defense team tried to use Madison's traumatic childhood as grounds for an insanity plea, arguing that the systematic abuse he'd suffered had created a mental illness that made him unable to control his actions. They presented evidence of the horrific violence Madison had endured as a child, the abuse he'd suffered, and the complete lack of stable relationships that had defined his early life. But the prosecution countered with evidence of Madison's calculated behavior. This wasn't someone who'd snapped in a moment of uncontrolled rage. This was a predator who'd carefully selected victims, methodically concealed evidence, and maintained elaborate deceptions to avoid detection. The planning and forethought that went into his crimes contradicted any claim of mental incapacity. The jury deliberated for a remarkably short time before finding Madison guilty on all 14 counts, including 3 counts of aggravated murder, 3 counts of kidnapping, 3 counts of gross abuse to a corpse, 1 count of rape, and 1 count of weapons possession by a convicted felon. The verdict was unanimous and decisive. During the sentencing phase, the families of Madison's victims finally had their opportunity to confront the man who'd destroyed their lives. The most powerful moment came when Sherella Terry's father, Larry, took the stand to deliver his victim impact statement. As he spoke about the pain of losing his daughter, Madison began smiling, a display of callousness that would have tragic consequences. Larry Terry's reaction was immediate and understandable. Seeing his daughter's killer smirking while he described his grief, Terry lunged across the courtroom toward Madison. Court officers quickly intervened, pulling Terry away before he could reach Madison. The incident perfectly captured the raw emotion and overwhelming sense of injustice that had driven the case from the beginning. On May 20, 2016, the jury recommended the death penalty for Michael Madison. The judge accepted their recommendation, sentencing Madison to death for the murders of Angela Deskins, Shatisha Sheely, and Sherella Terry. The sentence was later unanimously upheld by the Ohio Supreme Court, which found that the aggravating circumstances of Madison's crimes clearly outweighed any mitigating factors. Madison's appeals have been consistently denied, and as of 2024, he remains on death row at the Chillicothe Correctional Institution. The case that began with the smell of death in East Cleveland had finally reached its legal conclusion, but the emotional impact on the families and community continues to this day. Look, the conviction and sentencing of Michael Madison marked the end of his legal proceedings, but not the end of his story's impact on those he left behind. the families of his victims, the community of East Cleveland, and the broader justice system all continued to grapple with the consequences of his crimes long after the courtroom doors closed. For the families of Angela Deskins, Shatisha Sheely, and Sherella Terry, Madison's death sentence provided a form of justice, but it could never restore what had been lost. And each family faced the unique challenges of grieving for a loved one whose life had been cut short by senseless violence. The public nature of the crimes meant their grief was conducted under media scrutiny, adding another layer of difficulty to an already unbearable situation. Shatisha Sheely's mother, Kamida, faced the particularly devastating combination of losing both her daughter and her son within months of each other. Having to identify her daughter's remains after months of hoping she was still alive somewhere represented a trauma that would affect her for the rest of her life. The strength she showed throughout the investigation and trial became an inspiration to others dealing with similar losses. Sherella Terry's father, Larry, became an advocate for missing persons cases, using his experience to help other families navigate the difficult process of searching for missing loved ones. The fact that two serial killers had operated in the same area within such a short time frame raised questions about what factors made the community vulnerable to this type of predator. Investigators noted that both Madison and Soule had targeted women who were struggling with addiction, poverty, or other life challenges. Women whose disappearances were less likely to trigger immediate intensive investigations. In a tragic epilogue to the Madison story, his mother, Diane, was killed in 2019 during a home invasion. The irony that the woman who'd helped create a killer through her abuse ultimately became a victim of violence herself was not lost on those who'd followed the case. The cycle of violence that had defined Madison's childhood had continued, claiming another generation of victims. The Michael Madison case serves as a stark reminder of how childhood trauma can create monsters, but also how the justice system must hold individuals accountable for their actions, regardless of their backgrounds. While Madison's horrific upbringing helps explain his development into a killer, it doesn't excuse the choices he made as an adult to take the lives of 3 innocent women. Today, Madison remains on death row, his appeals exhausted, his fate sealed. The families of his victims continue to rebuild their lives while carrying the permanent scars of his crimes. The case stands as a testament to both the devastating impact of serial murder and the resilience of those who survive in its aftermath. If this story moved you or made you think, do me a favor and subscribe to True Crime Tragedies. We're dedicated to telling these important stories with the respect and depth they deserve. Hit that subscribe button and join our community. Thanks for watching.